Hi, my name's Yvonne Field, and I'm the assessment coordinator here at Montana's Office of Public Instruction. And the presentation that we're doing today, or for this October PLC on assessment and data, is going to provide an overview of one component of the Smarter Balanced Assessment System, the interim assessments. So I wanted to start off by talking about some of the big ideas for implementation of the interim assessments. The main thing is to kind of start off by putting interims in context. So they do support teaching, student learning, and inform instruction. And they are part of our assessment system that includes summative assessments and formative assessment practices. And of course, all of this is aligned to the Common Core state standards. And so we'll talk a little bit more just specifically about interims now. So two big ideas that I wanted to highlight today are that students benefit from taking interim assessments, and also teachers use interim assessment data to improve instruction. So let's talk about that first one in terms of what are some of the things that are beneficial to students. So first off, students have exposure to the testing platform that they'll use in the summative assessment. They also have exposure to accessibility, designated supports, and accommodations resources. Students gain appreciation for the depth of the questions, and interim data that can be shared with students can be used to share with students to help them take control of the next steps in their own learning. One thing to know is that students say that they thought taking a computer-administered test was more interesting and they like the technology. So that's something that we know. Next, so let's look a little bit deeper at students gaining more experience explaining and justifying their answers, which then helps them respond to test questions. So an example of this is in Lakeland School District in Idaho. Shayna Hosteller, who's a fourth grade teacher, found that the students felt better prepared for the summative assessment after engaging extensively in writing using sources and citations while taking the interim assessment blocks and during classroom instruction. For example, she used Socratic seminars to let students discuss a topic without teacher interruption. And then in math, students spent considerable time writing justifications for their answers to math problems. We also know that when students take interim assessments during the school year, student performance improves on the summative assessment. For example, in Pocatello-Chubbuck School District in Idaho, a majority of elementary grade teachers voluntarily administered interim assessments in 2015-16 after a pilot program showed positive results. In addition, the district purchased more technology equipment and added curriculum requirements in keyboarding to help students improve their ability to type long essay responses. Student performance on the 2016 summative assessment improved at all grade levels in both content areas and exceeded the state averages in all areas. So that's something that I've talked a lot with some different people in the state that have called about that piece, especially about students learning to use technology. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is that really college and career ready also includes that technology literacy, and that's something that's important to have on our minds. And I definitely think our implementation of online assessments has really raised that to the top of people's minds. So the next thing is that students learned to use technology. In 2015 in Norwich, Connecticut, public schools, two schools in Connecticut held a cognitive lab after students took the interim assessments to ask individual students questions about what they were thinking when responding to questions and whether the technology hampered them. The students clarified that the wording of the question caused them to pause, but the technology was not an issue. This anecdotal information was positive feedback for the district's technology training program that starts in second grade with iPad and Chromebooks. The district's technology training program includes training students to care for the devices, keeping them clean, wiping the keyboards, and not stacking devices. They learn about charging and carrying devices and how to report issues with an online ticket system. When students enter a classroom, they identify the strength of the wireless access point, and they help peers log into the devices using the hands in pockets philosophy of talking peers through the process instead of doing it for them. Our second big idea is the idea that teachers use interim assessment data to improve instruction. For instance, hand scoring resources help teachers understand the rigor of the assessed content. Teachers use interim assessment blocks as pre and post tests during instruction. When teachers learn to score items, they better understand how the Smarter Balanced Assessment aligns with the curriculum, and districts use the interim assessment blocks and student data to develop professional learning resources. So hand scoring resources, they help teachers understand the rigor of the assessed content. And we'll talk a little bit later about exactly what hand scoring resources there are and what that means in the context of administering interims. But an example in Lakeland School District in Idaho is that classroom teachers tried out several interim assessment blocks and discussed the student data in their Monday collaboration time. They identified areas of alignment between the interims and the grade level curriculum and discussed using the interims as pre and post assessments during instruction. Because all teachers have access to all grade levels of the interim assessment blocks, they are able to give an interim from the previous grade as a pretest, and then after instruction, use the interim assessment block from the current grade level to assess what has been learned. Districts, when teachers learn to score items, So here's an example in San Juan Unified School District, California. They're training teachers to score the responses to interim assessments to understand the rigor and curriculum alignment of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. So in 2015, their survey results revealed that a majority of teachers needed professional development support and instructional resources to help students with the process skills of strategic thinking, research, investigation, and high-level problem-solving skills. The district sponsored a training of trainers to reach all 65 school sites. At the end of the school year, they documented the use of interim assessments in 16 of 65 schools, and will analyze the performance of students who participated in interim assessments compared to students who did not participate. So in the 2016-17 school year, the district continued to expand training with face-to-face sessions and narrated PowerPoint presentations to reach as many teachers as possible. The district moved forward to upload teachers into the online assessment reporting system for hands-on access to data as soon as it was available. District staff also taught teachers how to read the data and supported teachers who engaged colleagues in in-depth data discussions with tools and templates using Smarter Balanced claim level data. In 2017, they will also use target level data. The outcome of these data conversations has led the majority of the sites to build testing schedules for English language arts and math to complete testing and return the results in June for articulation and summer planning. Next, we know that districts use interim assessment blocks and student data to develop professional learning resources. For instance, in Cupertino, California, district staff created a professional learning protocol for principals to train teachers with an inquiry approach. The protocol correlates specific interims aligned to the curriculum at each grade level and the data received from the assessments, as well as explains how to interpret assessment data related to the student's learning progress. We do have some resources that I can share with you guys that give a more detailed description of the implementation process. And in general, I can recommend that you all go out to the California Department of Education website and look for some of the things that they have there. I mean, we know that in Montana, we have sometimes limited resources and staff to create some of these things, and California has quite a bit more resources than we do, and they have a very robust site with a lot of really good resources to use to help you to work on implementation of interims. We also know that interims help teachers to recognize the need to shift instruction to align with state academic standards. So an example of that is in California, they started using Smarter Balanced interim assessments in 2015-16, and they replaced the district's local common assessments. They determined that those really lacked curriculum alignment, rigor, and accessibility and accommodations resources. And in that spring in 2015, 2 schools piloted the interims, and based on the pilot, the district adopted 3 interim assessment blocks in ELA and 3 in math district-wide. And they gave a lot of support for implementation. They did training of trainers. They did follow-up training for curriculum coaches on hand scoring and analysis of results. And what they found was that after exploring the interim assessment blocks and scoring students' written responses, many teachers realized that they needed to shift their instruction to better align with the rigor of the Common Core state standards. The depth of understanding that teachers were expecting wasn't reflected in student responses. So that was particularly evident among the high-performing students. The district continues to use interims and provides additional professional learning on the purpose of assessments, the use of performance tasks, and the use of formative assessment for teaching and learning. In the future, they plan on having district assessments that will incorporate brief writing and performance tasks. So again, that's another piece that California has worked on, and so I do highly recommend going and taking a look at their website. And I will actually post some of that in the forum for this, for our October meeting. So we also know that training staff on interim assessments helps teacher understand the value of interims to make decisions about instruction. So an example of that is in Lakeland, Idaho. They include introducing the interim assessments to all staff. The principal, director of information, and coaches help teachers to use at least one interim assessment to get everyone comfortable with the test sessions. The practice helped teachers and students feel more comfortable when it was time for the summative assessment. They also trained teachers to score the hand-scored items and submit scores in the teacher hand-scoring system. This helped teachers understand how the hand-scored items are scored for the summative assessment. In the next year, they plan more use of interim assessments to support data discussions at monthly collaboration meetings. And then once they appreciate the validity of the interim assessments to measure learning of a cluster of standards, teachers are more likely to buy into the continued use of interim assessments. District and school staffs have found that emphasizing the benefits of interims to get valid data to make decisions about instruction has been a successful message. One other thing that we know is that teachers are empowered when they can make decisions about when and how to use assessments. So Tara Richardson, she's a district assessment coordinator in Washington, initiated an open discussion of the purpose and use of all the district assessments. She undertook an assessment inventory with an analysis of the cost per assessment in terms of time and money. The staff evaluated the impact of assessments on several stakeholder groups and made changes the next year based on the results of the evaluation and conversations with key users, including teachers. It's been empowering for teachers to make decisions about when and how to use assessments, including smarter balanced interim assessments. These discussions led to a look at the grading policies that specify the use of assessment data in grades at the secondary level. The staff formed a data governance committee to build proficiency scales 1 through 4 that align the academic standards, instructional materials, and grades. Next, they're revising report card descriptors and assigning scores on common assessments to the proficiency scales. So I just wanted to go through some of those real examples that Smarter Balanced has gathered about interims and their implementation and some of the things that are going on in districts across the Smarter Balanced Consortium. I did get all of this information from the Smarter Balanced website, and I included those links there. But the other thing I wanted to talk about today, we kind of talked about the why of interims and what are the benefits, but I also wanted to get a little bit into the nuts and bolts to give you an overview of what the Smarter Balanced interim assessments are, where you can find them on our OPI, our Montana websites, and just some information about what they are. So the basics are they're available on demand. They don't cost anything for Montana schools to use. We provide that through our contract as part of our assessment system. There is no limit to the number of times students can test. They can be used in grade levels other than the enrolled grades. And in fact, we upload second graders into TIDE as well. So if you wanted to test those second graders on third grade content, you can. They're fixed form, non-adaptive. One thing that I also wanted to point out with grade levels is that we have high school interims available, even though we're using the ACT. If you wanted to use the Smarter interims for high school, those are available. They are fixed form as opposed to our summative assessment, which is adaptive. So that means they're non-adaptive, which actually makes more sense for those interim assessment blocks. And it includes a full range of item types. So the computer administered ones versus performance tasks and brief rates are all available. And the other thing about the interims are that they have the same accessibility options as the summative assessment. So that means there are universal tools that are available to all students. There's designated supports, things that people like our English learners might need that are available to any student that needs an education team decides they need that. And then there are also accommodations, or those things that are only available to students with IEPs or 504s. But that's a really beneficial reason to use the interims. It gives students that need those accessibility options a chance to try them out and give you feedback on what works best for them. And you get to see how some of those accommodations and accessibility features are actually working on the assessment, so you have an idea of what that'll be like for them on the summative. And finally, the interims are a non-secure item bank. That means even though they're not available for the public to view, we actually have a practice test that's something that you can share with anyone. This is a way for educators to be able to look at the items that students will see, the types of items that students will see on the Smarter Balanced summative assessment. You can share and discuss those amongst educators in your local setting. You definitely wouldn't share those with parents, media, or other people, but if you wanted to have parents be able to see what the assessment is like, we have another tool for that. That's the practice test that's available on the Smarter Balanced website. But that's a good thing about this. I often hear people, wanting to look at the items on the summative assessment, which is secure, and educators are not supposed to look at those items or examine them, but this gives you a way to really see what those types of items are like and examine some test items. So they are top secret for you and your district to discuss and look at. The other thing about the interims is that they were developed under the same conditions, protocols, and review procedures as those used on the summative assessments. So that means, they really are quality items, as good as what students will see on the summative. I wanted to kind of give you the idea of what are the Smarter interim system components. So test administrators use the test administration tile to select interim types and content and set up sessions for students to take the interims. That is also the same tile that you use for summative assessments. Then students, once you have a session set up, students will sign into the secure browser to take the selected interim assessment. The interim Smarter Balanced tests have items that can be scored by machine and items that require human scoring. The teacher hand scoring system, or THSS, allows authorized users at the local level to score item responses that require human scoring. Some example of items that are machine scored are selected response items. Examples of items that must be hand scored are performance tasks and short write items. So when students in a test session submit an assessment, the hand-scored items are sent to the teacher hand scoring system, where authorized users can view students' responses to each item and enter scores or mark them with condition codes. The THSS is found on the Smarter portal. Once the hand-scored items are scored, educators can access the interim results reports and analyze data in the online reporting system. So all of these components, including downloading of secure browsers, are found on the Montana Smarter Ballots portal. And we'll take a quick tour of that, and I'll show you how to access some of these and what that all looks like. I wanted to talk about the two types of interim assessments. We have the IABs, or interim assessment blocks, and those are smaller sets of related concepts. They provide detailed information for instructional purposes, and they're electronically scored and hand scored. So performance tasks and short writes or brief writes are hand scored locally. So that's something that need to take into account. For both of the types of interims. The interim comprehensive assessment is the same content as the summative, so you would get that, the complete summative assessment experience where they're taking all of the grade level content that they would take on like what they would take on a summative assessment. So, and scoring and scaling is the same as our regular summative assessment. It is electronically and hand scored, so some of that scoring is going to take, the hand scoring is going to take place at the local level. So you've got those two types of interims. Assessment blocks for teachers that are teaching a certain set of standards can pull the blocks that are related and give an assessment just on that, and then the interim comprehensive assessment. So we talked, just to go back a little bit to this, some of the uses that I could see for the interim comprehensive assessment that I've heard about are, I had a district where they got a student who's an English learner, and they came from another country, and they weren't sure sort of where he was instruction-wise coming into their school. And so they used the interim comprehensive assessment as a way to get a good idea of where that student was in terms of their education background, and to see where they are and how they match up with what's going on here in the US in their school. So that's one use of that. I know some districts might use the interim comprehensive assessment as sort of a beginning of the year indicator of where their students are with the content at mid-year to do that again. And then, obviously at the end of the year, you have the summative. So it kind of gives a big picture at a couple of times of year leading up to that summative. Definitely the interim assessments are used as pre-assessments and post-assessments for units that teachers are teaching. And they're nice because you can pull just those specific blocks of items that you want to find out about. So what interims are available? Let's just quickly go over for math. In grades 3 through 4 and 5, you can see the blocks are organized in this way with the operations and algebraic thinking, and you can kind of look numbers and operations, fractions, geometry, measurement, and data are there. And one thing I already talked about, second graders are loaded into the TIDE system for districts that would like to give the interim to that group of students. In grades 6 and 7, you can kind of take a scan and see what's available there. And then for grade 8, and math for high school, as I mentioned, even though we don't give the Smarter in high school, you still have access to these really good tools to know how your students are doing against the Common Core state standards. For English language arts and literacy, these are the blocks that are available. And then in high school, so I did want to take you out. I'm going to pull up our OPI website, and the first thing that I want to do is just, on our new website, show you how to get to the assessment page and find the link for the Smarter Balanced portal. So you would mouse over leadership, click on statewide testing, and then when you scroll down, we have a whole section with all our different online assessment system links. And so Smarter is right here. And that brings you to the portal. You might want to bookmark this if it's something that you use often. That secure browser is downloaded here in this section. You would just click on that tile. It brings you into a page with a lot of information about what you need. Some people have their tech coordinator do that for them. So here's kind of the landing page, the way that you'll get into administer tests and access results is by clicking on that the system test administrator link. Up here we have Tide. That's where we manage students. There's a practice and training test that's available here. So that would be where you would set up sessions for students to practice, where they would actually log into the secure browser. There's another practice test that's available to the public that's on the Smarter Balanced website. So if you want to show parents, you would use that Smarter Balanced version, which doesn't require a login information or a secure browser. The assessment viewing application, this is something that I would kind of recommend that you guys do as a next step after this presentation, would be to go log in and actually go and take one of the interim assessment blocks. Or, I mean, if you're really ambitious, you could do the comprehensive version. But when you click on that tile, everybody needs to have a login. And so if you don't have one, the person that could set it up for you, if you're not the test coordinator, is your system test coordinator in your district. If you're a test coordinator and you don't have access, you would contact us here at OPI. So for those tiles, some of the tiles you don't need to log in to get into them, but most of them you do. And every time you click on one of those, it'll ask you to put in your password. If you had one last year, note that if you're logging in for the first time this school year, you need to go through this process to request a new one and reset your password for the year. It does remember who you are, though. So once you do that for the assessment viewing application, it'll bring you in and you can go in and select a grade level that's applicable to you. And then once you get in there, you have these options. You can go in and choose assessment blocks, any of these things, these items. And you can see it says number and operations, all of that is there. And these are so those are the interim assessment blocks. They're yellow. And then the interim comprehensive assessment, you can go in and take that in ELA and mathematics. So you can see what those are like. So once you select those, it pulls up this. You can select a form and just say yes. There's a way to test your audio here. And you hear the sound, and then it'll open up that AVA for you. All right, so that's what that looks like, and that would be if you haven't taken a practice test or haven't experienced those IABs. I highly recommend that all the educators in your school go in and do that as a kind of a first step to getting dipping their toe into interim assessment. The place that you would go to actually administer the interim assessment blocks are here under test administration, which some of you may be familiar with this from the Smarter Balanced assessment. So you click on there and set up test sessions. The teacher hand scoring system is accessed through here. You want to make sure that you have to have students who have taken the test for the items to show up in the teacher hand scoring system. The online reporting system where you look at the results is here. And what happens actually if students have taken the computer administered items where it's scored by the system, those will show up there. If they also have taken a performance task or brief write item that needs you to hand score, you'll hand score it, and then it takes a little bit of time to get into the online reporting system. But once those are scored, then it will automatically generate a report there. One thing that everybody needs to do before they can administer any of the tests, the interims or smarter, is take the test administrator certification. It's a pretty short module that you take that goes over how to set up test sessions and what you need to do. So those are kind of the main things that you need to know about for interims. There are also some administration resources here. The digital library is our formative assessment library, where you can find those sort of formative assessment everyday kinds of pieces. And so that actually has a separate login, but there, when you click on that, there's a way to set up a login for that too. So if you're interested in formative assessment with the Smarter Balance, come back next month. We're going to have Pam Birkland. She's our person who works on that for us. She's going to present next month on that piece. I should also say too that I'm working on, and it's just about to launch, a course to get test administrators and people in districts trained to administer the interims, trained on the teacher hand scoring system and how to use some of those results. And we're going to host that on the Teacher Learning Hub. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about resources to get trained, that's coming up pretty quickly here. Let's see, we talked about certification, administration, hand scoring, and score reports. And I just wanted to open it up for discussion. And this is what I have posted in the forum too. Now that you have a little bit more about the Smarter Balance interim assessments and how you might use those in your local settings, I thought we could discuss the interim tools that you currently use and how you think the Smarter Balance interims might be useful in your setting. And I'm gonna unmute everyone. Let's see. There we go. So I think let's start with that first question. How might you use, let's see, discuss what interim tools that you currently use in your district.
Yvonne, I have a question here.
Sure.
I was wondering, so I see that teachers are able to get in through the assessment viewing application, and just remembering from my experience not being able to enter the site until we got closer to testing. So should teachers who want to use this in their classroom, that's maybe not a district-wide decision or a school-wide decision, should they just speak to their testing administrator and maybe get their login information a little bit earlier in the year than they typically would?
And if they had an account last year, they can go ahead and get their password reset right away. The interims are available as of now. Actually, the 23rd is when those became available. So those are available a lot sooner this year than they were last year. I think, well, they were available, but people didn't know as much about them. So they are available right now, and any teacher that wants to access those, they just need to have a test administrator log in to be able to go and use those.
Okay.
Do you know if anyone in your district who's used the interims?
Well, so I am here upstairs at OPI,
hi.
but it's okay. But I know my school district I was in last year, that was actually in Washington State, did not use the interim assessment. I kind of wish that we had.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to know that information is available for all Montana teachers.
Yeah.
And I guess my other question is, I'm wondering what the online reporting system looks like, and would love to, work with a school and see what kind of information that schools can get back, so that teachers really feel that it's worthwhile to have their students take all the assessments and, with that feedback.
It is nice. The online reporting system is a little different. We have GEMS where we kind of house the final accountability data, and the online reporting system is really a tool to use. If you're familiar with MARS, it has some similar resources to use there. So you can get an actual report that you could print out, but there's also ways to look at your data to analyze it, to see how, all of you, if you did, I know when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, we used interim assessments across a whole grade level. And then we would look at that data for the whole grade level to see where students were doing with different claims and even targets. And so you can drill down into the information in that way. You can look down into the individual student, but you can also set up classrooms of students and look at specific students for a specific teacher, or you can look across the whole grade level. So those are some of the things that you can do in the online reporting system.
Awesome. This might sound silly. I'm wondering, the online reporting system is always for these interim assessments, but is it also for the summit, the year-end assessment, or our high stakes test that happens? And so they also teachers can go into that online reporting system
yes,
and look
the
at that.
Smarter Balanced resources. You can use that for the summative assessment as well. One thing that I always caution people when they're looking at and trying to compare, their district to other districts, or their school to other schools, or their school, and how they're doing with the state level data, that's really something you should do in GEMS. But if you're doing some of that work that we were just talking about, where you want to look at your individual students, your classroom level, your district, your school level, grade level information, that would be what the ORS is really meant for. The data that goes into there is kind of that initial data before it gets a cleanup by OPI, and so that's why I caution about using it to compare with the state or other districts. It gives you a ballpark, but it's not the finalized data. I know if you'd like to talk to a little bit about what you guys do in your district in terms of interim assessment, or Sarah.
We mostly brought all of our teachers in and just showed them what was available and just encouraged them last year to incorporate, for math in particular, the blocks on smartboard lessons so the kids could practice just the manipulation of how the problems look, etc. But we spent most of our time focused on the ELA blocks, the long rights, and our results showed that we spent way too much time on that, and our math scores went in the tank. But our English ELA scores were up quite a lot. So this year we're going to actually require, we haven't decided how many interim blocks, but we are going to require it as part of their curriculum. And that's the next meeting after this, is to decide which ones we're going to require them to do by grade level.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
We didn't do it enough, we don't think, yeah.
Okay. Jonna's in Hellgate Elementary. And I should say, Marissa, do you want to introduce yourself and say what you do here at OPI?
Hi, sure, yes. I am the mathematics instructional coordinator here at OPI. New here, and so just learning more about how the state works with our smarter balanced systems and our statewide assessments, and how best to have the schools that are using the assessments and taking the interim assessments, how you can share how that benefited your school or how that benefited your teachers. Definitely is something that we're thinking on the math side too, trying to get more schools to interact with Smarter Balance pre the test date at the end of the year.
One thing that I like to highlight, because I work on accessibility for all of our assessments, is the importance of using some of these tools, the practice test and the interims, to allow students that might need accessibility features to test them out beforehand. Then you can have these really rich discussions with them about, what was that tool useful for you? What else would you maybe need to make make the assessment more accessible for you? They get to try out the things that they're going to use. So I really like to highlight that students can it can help them define sort of what, and define it themselves, what works best for them in terms of accommodations and supports that they might need. And then the other thing is definitely when we want to make things accessible to students, we want what we use in instruction to also match up with what they would see on the assessment. So that allows you to do that, and it's sort of, you've got those built-in features that are there for you and ready. So that's also making things more accessible overall for your students.
That was one of the things we found too. We charted our goal strands, and we really performed poorly on the listening portion of the ELA summative, and so we think it's just as simple as if the kids were kind of over it and didn't take the time to make sure their audio portion was working for that test, that they would have missed, an entire sub-test of questions if they didn't listen to the audio version of that part of the test. And so I'm hoping, and I haven't looked through, that there is a block or something that does allow them to practice the listening portion as well. But I do think those accommodations are important, just so the kids can advocate for themselves to make sure things are working, because sometimes the teachers forget to make sure, you know what I mean?
The other component of that is we're working on educating educators and special education teachers that just because we have this array of supports available, it doesn't mean we should give them all to the student. It really should be based on what that student actually, that individual needs. We don't want to give them too much accommodations, things that they don't need, because we want to maximize their independence, and we really want to be measuring what they can do on their own. So really just this helps to kind of sort out what are the things that they absolutely need as supports for the test based on, that individual student need. So it gives a tool for that, I think. So I think we sort of did, we talked about interim tools we talked more about whether anyone used the Smarter Balanced interims, but what are some of the other interim tools that you currently use in your setting? Are there other things? And I guess we're putting Jonna on the spot today.
Well, I guess I don't know if this is the same. I mean, for the blocks, and I mean, we just did a lot of teacher instruction and let them come in to look at what the blocks look like, what the ICAs look like, so that they could just see the rigor that was involved. And then last year we didn't have any specific guidelines of, here's what you have to do. We did strongly encourage them to at least try, some math options and some ELA, but I mean, another tool that's indirect is just the keyboarding requirements for particularly our third graders who've never had any typing instruction. So I think there's a huge benefit practicing those long writes, so they just get a feel for even how to find the letters on the keypad. We purchased keypads for all their iPads, so they didn't have to use a touch screen, and now are having big curriculum discussions within the district of, even though our OT is telling us it's not developmentally appropriate to teach typing to third grade, what are we going to do so that this isn't so hard for them come the test time? So thus the practice all the time with the typing.
Right, and that goes back to, I think, the first part of the presentation and talking a little bit about how some of this online assessments are bringing that technology literacy need to the forefront. And I like to think about that in terms of, well, when students are, college and career ready, part of that is also having technology literacy. And I think that's an important piece. I don't know if Kalei is on, or Marissa, you could speak to any of the things that are going on at OPI level in terms of awareness of that need for more kind of specific technology literacy curriculum or standards.
So we're definitely in that long-term process of doing standards revision. Technology, those specifically are part of it, as well as kind of this more broad topic of digital literacy. That's kind of the good news, is that we're definitely looking at that. Kind of the bad news part of that is that we're looking at that more over the long term in the 2 to 4 year range in terms of making those changes in standards at the state level. So I'm really interested, especially to hear what you said, Jana, about occupational therapists talking about the developmental appropriateness of keyboarding instruction, and that I know that that's definitely been a topic over the last 3 to 4 years that a lot of districts have asked about, and really it is in your hands to make those determinations at the local level. So this is really valuable discussion to hear about those sorts of concerns in particular. But what I would also say too about the standards and technology standards is that they are those high-level expectations. They're not going to talk about when and how to do keyboarding teaching.
Right.
They are going to be about the big skills and the bigger ideas of what students need to know and be able to do in order to be technologically literate, I guess, for lack of a better term.
From the assessment research standpoint, too, in terms of technology, I know that WIDA Consortium, our English Language Proficiency Assessment, they did quite a bit of research, and they have students in grades 1 through 3 complete the writing portion of that assessment in a handwriting booklet. So they're all doing handwritten responses in grades 1 through 3, and then they've kept the kindergarten assessment a one-to-one paper-based assessment based on some of that research that they've done. And then we also provide an option in grades 4 through 12 for any district or school to choose a handwriting option for any of their English learners that might need that. So that's some flexibility that is built in there, but there's some good research that WIDA's done on exactly when it is that students could start keyboarding responses for writing assessments.
You bet.
I can speak to coming from a smaller school where we actually spent 3 times throughout the year. We spent a morning where we did do a practice written. I'm trying to remember the name of it for SBAC. So as a math teacher, it was the writing component, and so we did do some mock ones that our English teachers created for us. And this was a middle school, and it was fascinating because the creation of the task is so interesting because it's both visual, audio, reading for our students, and then having them compose an argument, and was a really enlightening experience as a math teacher to learn about that, the challenges of the writing component on the SBAC. But it was super valuable for both all teachers involved, even though it wasn't directly a math practice. But that's pretty awesome.
I was thinking too, Jana, when you brought up the this teachers understanding, and when we talked a little bit about the rigor, and one of the things about training teachers with the teacher hand scoring system is that they really dig into exemplars, they dig into the rigor and the depth of knowledge, and they really get deep into what that standard is, what that looks like to assess it, and then how to score that, and they use some of the rubrics. And so that's one thing that's really valuable about, actually, that's kind of a side note, to using interims to get data. It also helps teachers really understand more deeply what it looks like to assess the Common Core state standards. And I know we've done some work in the past with using some of the rubrics and item specifications that are available as part of our development of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And I see that as some things that we can take and use in the instructional end of things to help teachers. Well, if you have to write an assessment, well, here are these really great, robust resources that went in, are a product of our development of Smarter Balance that can be used in instruction and to help teachers to know how to write assessments to use with their students in their instruction every day.
Absolutely. I think and I don't know, I think the scoring is hard. I don't know if I missed some trainings, but everything I tried to find online, it's tough. Like that was one of I think the things as a district that we need help with, which falls on me. So I don't really know. Well, and I think that is, and it was hard to find. You know, I had some teachers that did hand score, and then we weren't able to find reports, and it's kind of a tough process.
Yeah. So we're working on, with our limited amount of time, getting that an interim assessment teacher learning hub course going, and it'll go right into some good detail on the teacher hand scoring system to train teachers, but then also I'm trying to build in some components where we do and some inter-rater reliability too, where you would all be scoring the same thing and comparing your notes about that. So we're going to build in something that's pretty robust, and then I'm hoping, we'll have the Teacher Learning Hub course, but I also want to have a set of resources so that if you wanted to go and implement that in your district and be the one who's doing the training, that you would have those resources available to use in that way as well.
Sure.
Yep, and those are imminent. That course and the resources are imminent.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else that's sort of a burning question on anyone's mind, or a topic that you think we missed that we should discuss? I'm going to give us a minute to think about that, and if not, I think we'll sign off for today.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. I do know the recording, I'll post that in our for people that are participating in the kind of offline version. But if anyone does want to get into the forum and take a look at maybe reply and respond to some of the people that are there, I think that would be helpful in making the discussion there more robust. And so if John or Sarah, if you guys want to hop on there, Marissa or Colette, and maybe do a little post and think about replying to somebody, that would be helpful.
Okay.
All right. Okay, everyone, have a good day. And be in touch.
Yvonne.
Donna, let's talk more about the teacher hand scoring training and what we can.
Perfect. Yeah, I need help.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.